Did you know that the Ethio-Semitic people have preserved one of the oldest branches of Semitic languages in the world and are one of the oldest African civilizations, having the longest and most continuous history of any Christian nation in the world? The term Ethio-Semitic people is an anglicized term for the Habesha people, one of the most distinctive and culturally influential groups in East Africa, a people whose identity emerged from a deep and ancient meeting between Arabia and Africa. As you know, the Habesha people are indigenous to Northeast Africa, but their story is a story of blending between human lineages, ethnicities, and continents. However, their deep origins in the region, though not the identity itself, came from a subgroup of East African hunter-gatherers, a group closely related to the Omotic peoples of the Omo Valley. This lineage emerged in Africa after branching from basal East Africans approximately 80,000 years ago and became isolated in clusters across East Africa, giving rise to distinct East African hunter-gatherer groups such as the Mota, Hadzabe, and the African ancestries found among Omotics, Kushites, and Ethio-Semites. These groups lived as hunter-gatherers across the vast landscapes of East Africa until the arrival of the first West Eurasian peoples in the region around 7,000 to 5,000 years ago, during the mid-Holocene and towards the end of the African Humid period. An Ethiopian-related group in the Levant, known as the Levantine farmer, began to increase in number and expand throughout Arabia, North Africa, and East Africa. Their demographic rise is due to their adoption of an agricultural lifestyle, rather than surviving as hunter-gatherers. One small wave eventually reached East Africa and mixed with the aboriginal East African hunter-gatherers. This mixing gave rise to the foundational genetic mosaic known as the Cushitic or Ethio-Somali genetic component, in which all Cushitic peoples share. However, in the case of the Habesha, another layer of West Eurasian ancestry later arrived. During the Bronze Age and the Early Iron Age, South Semitic-speaking peoples from southern Arabia, particularly from present-day Yemen, crossed the Red Sea and established trading colonies and settlements along the Horn of Africa, mostly in Eritrea and the Ethiopian highlands. However, these migrants were relatively few in numbers and did not replace the local Cushitic populations. Instead, they gradually mixed with the indigenous Cushitic peoples and introduced several important cultural elements. Among these were South Semitic languages, religious traditions, agricultural techniques, architectural styles, and the ancient South Arabian script, which was called Musnad, which would later evolve into the Ge'ez writing system. Over time, some local Cushitic populations assimilated into the Ethio-Semitic cultural sphere, and as generations passed, the descendants of these communities increasingly spoke Semitic languages and started to identify with this new identity, the Habesha, causing this group to rise in demographic numbers. Today, approximately 50% of the Habesha people carry the paternal haplogroup associated with the local Kushites, E1b1b, indicating that their paternal ancestors were the assimilated Kushites, while approximately 35% of the Habeshas carry the paternal haplogroup of J1 with a minor presence of J2, indicating that some Habesha paternal haplogroups originated from the Bronze Age Yemenite settlers. All in all, the genetic breakdown of an average Habesha is as follows, although it might vary from region to region, tribe to tribe, and clan to clan. However, on average, Habeshas are generally composed to approximately 45 to 52% East African hunter-gatherer ancestry and 48% to 55% West Eurasian ancestry, which comes from the Levantine Neolithic ancestry at approximately 33.6% to 38.5%, and Bronze Age South Arabian ancestry at approximately 14.4% to 16.5%. Their early West Eurasian Holocene component is composed of approximately 36% to 41% Natufian ancestry, 9.6% and 11% Zagrossian ancestry, and lastly 2.4% to 2.75% Anatolian Neolithic farmer ancestry. And their deeper Pleistocene West Eurasian ancestry consists of approximately 21.6 to 24.75 Zutzuana or West Eurasian hunter-gatherer ancestry, and 19.2% and 22% basal Eurasian ancestry, and lastly 7.2% to 8.75% ancestral North African ancestry. Now that we know the ancestral background of the Habesha, let us discuss their internal diversity. But before I do that, I have an important announcement. This video is just an introduction to this group, but in my book, World Encyclopedia of African Peoples, I go much deeper. Not only did I discuss this group with its internal diversity, but all Afro-derived lineages from the oldest to the youngest and their internal diversity, and also the Afro-derived identities that emerged during the Middle Ages, colonial era, and the global Afro-derived diaspora. In each chapter, I explore their genetic and ancestral backgrounds, history and migrations, geographic distribution, phenotypic traits, languages and communication, traditional lifestyle and economies, cultural traits and customs, modern identity and diaspora, and much more to each and every African ethnic group. It's an eye-opening read full of knowledge and one of the best ways to discover your African brethren. The book is available on Amazon, and purchasing it is the best way to support my channel. The link and more details are in description. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to today's topic. Let's start with the phenotypic diversity. At first glance, an average Habesha looks indistinguishable from other neighboring Kushites. This is because of their shared and similar ancestry. However, there are two types of Habesha phenotypes, one that leans more Ethiopid and other that leans more Orientalid. The majority of the Habesha possess the central Ethiopid phenotype, a phenotype that they share with their highland Cushitic neighbors, especially the Oromo, in which this phenotype is molded by adapting to the cold and cloudy Ethiopian highlands. This phenotype is characterized by a rather tall stature, medium to reddish-brown skin tones. Their bodies are usually ectomorphic to mesomorphic builds. Their hair is usually tightly curled soft afro, and their noses is relatively high leptomesorine noses. Their lips are usually full, their chins are usually strong, and their ears are usually small. And also, they have large almond-shaped eyes, in which it is heavily lidded. Another phenotype found among a minority of Habeshas is the Oriental Ethiopid phenotype. Individuals with this Habesha phenotype can sometimes pass for a Peninsular Arab, but most of its characteristics are similar to those of the Central Ethiopid phenotype, with the main difference being that it possesses more pronounced Orientalid features, such as ectomorphic builds, softer hair textures, higher bridged aquiline leptorine noses, medium brown skin with a small minority having light brown, a prominent midface, and abundant facial and body hair. This phenotype is a result of blendings between Central Ethiopid, Yemenid, and Arabid influences. Now let's discuss the various Habesha ethnic groups. Let's start with the Tigray/Tigrayans. The Tigrayan peoples represent some of the oldest surviving Ethio-Semitic speaking populations in the world. Their roots are closely connected to the ancient civilizations that emerged in present-day northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. The ancestors of the Tigrayans likely emerged through interactions between South Semitic speaking migrants and indigenous Cushitic speaking populations, particularly the Agao and other highland Kushites. Over centuries, these populations blended culturally and genetically, while developing distinct identities centered around the Tigrinya and Tigray languages. The Tigray/Tigrayans were at the heart of some of the Horn of Africa's greatest civilizations. Their ancestors played a major role in the kingdom of Demont, the first Ethio-Semitic civilizations in Ethiopia, and later the powerful kingdom of Aksum, one of the most influential states of the ancient world. Aksum controlled important trade routes connecting Africa, Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean, and its borders reached as far as Himyarite Yemen for a short while. Their amazing civilization is also reflected in their architecture. Tigrayan and Eritrean highland architecture reflects this ancient heritage. Massive stone monuments, obelisks, churches, monasteries, and fortified settlements can be found throughout the region. The famous stelae of Aksum remain among Africa's greatest archaeological treasures. Religion remains an important aspect of Tigrayan identity. Majority of Tigrayans belong to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, while the Tigray population in Eritrea are predominantly Sunni Muslim, with Christian minorities also present. The Tigrayans are also famous for preserving the Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical languages of the Ethiopian and Eritrean churches, helping maintain one of the world's oldest continuous literary traditions. A similar group to the Tigray are the Amhara, the largest and most influential Ethio-Semitic speaking group in Ethiopia and one of the most important peoples in the history of the Horn of Africa. The origins of the Amhara can be traced to the central and northern Ethiopian highlands, where Ethio-Semitic speaking populations gradually emerged through centuries of interactions between South Semitic speaking settlers and indigenous Cushitic speaking peoples. Among the most important of these indigenous populations were the Ago, a Cushitic speaking peoples who once occupied large portions of the northern and central highlands. The Amhara played a central role in many of Ethiopia's most famous kingdoms and empires. They became one of the principal populations of the Ethiopian Empire and were influential during the Zagwe dynasty, the Solomonic dynasty, and later the Ethiopian Empire under emperors such as Menelik II and Haile Selassie. Amhara architecture is one of the most recognizable in Africa. Their architectural traditions include stone castles, churches carved into mountainsides, monasteries, and fortified settlements. The historic city of Gondar is famous for its royal castle, while the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela represent one of the greatest architectural achievements in Christian Africa. Religion remains central to Amhara identity. Approximately 80 to 85% of Amharas belong to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, while smaller minorities practice Islam and Protestant Christianity. Amhara culture is famous for its poetry, literature, religious music, coffee ceremonies, and rich traditions of hospitality. Their language, Amharic, eventually became Ethiopia's most widely spoken language and serves today as one of the country's principal languages. Now let's move to the smallest, yet most distinctive Ethio-Semitic speaking group, the Harari people. The Harari developed in and around the historical city of Harar, one of Africa's most important centers of Islamic scholarship and trade. The origins of the Harari involve centuries of integration between Ethio-Semitic speaking populations and neighboring Cushitic speaking peoples, particularly the Somalis and later Oromos. As trade expanded across the Horn of Africa, merchants, scholars, and travelers from Arabia, the Somali Peninsula, and the Ethiopian interior contributed to the foundation of Harari society. The Harari reached their political peak under the Adal Sultanate, one of the most powerful Islamic states in East Africa. Harar later became an independent emirate and an important center of Islamic learning. Harari architecture is unique within Ethiopia. The walled city of Harar Jugol is famous for its narrow streets, colorful homes, interior courtyards, and distinctive decorative designs. Today, approximately 95% or more Hararis practice Sunni Islam, making them one of the most uniformly Muslim groups in Ethiopia. Harari culture places great emphasis on education, trade, poetry, hospitality, and religious scholarship, helping the city earn its reputation as one of the great Islamic centers of Africa. A similar group to the Harar are the Argoba. The Argoba are one of Ethiopia's oldest Muslim Ethio-Semitic speaking peoples. Their origins are closely connected to the early spread of Islam into the Horn of Africa and centuries of interaction with neighboring Cushitic-speaking populations, particularly the Afar and later Oromo communities. Through intermarriage and cultural exchange, the Argoba developed a distinct identity while preserving their Semitic language. Historically, the Argoba were important merchants and traders who connected the Ethiopian highlands with the Red Sea coast and the wider Islamic world. They were associated with several medieval Muslim states and played important roles in regional commerce. Argoba settlements often display architectural influences from both the Ethiopian highlands and neighboring Muslim societies. Today, the overwhelming majority of Argobas practice Islam, which remains one of the strongest pillars of their identity. Argoba culture is known for its trading heritage, Islamic scholarship, oral traditions, and strong family networks. Although smaller in number than many neighboring groups, the Argoba remains an important part of Ethiopia's cultural and historic landscape. Now let's move on to the last Ethio-Semitic group, the Gurage. The Gurage are among the most distinctive Ethio-Semitic speaking peoples of Ethiopia. The Gurage are among the most diverse Ethio-Semitic speaking peoples of Ethiopia. The origins of the Gurage are complex and involve centuries of interactions between Semitic-speaking settlers and various Cushitic-speaking populations, especially the Hadiya and Kambata peoples. Through migration, intermarriage, and cultural exchange, a distinct Gurage identity gradually emerged in south-central Ethiopia. Unlike some Habesha groups, whose history is dominated by large centralized empires, the Gurage developed through networks of clans, communities, and local chiefdoms. Their history is characterized by strong local traditions, trade, and agricultural innovation. Gurage architecture traditionally features circular homes built from wood, stone, and thatch. Their settlements are often carefully organized and adapted to the mountainous terrains of their homeland. Religion among the Gurage is diverse. Significant portions practice Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, Islam, and Protestant Christianity, depending on the specific Gurage subgroup. The Gurage are particularly famous for their entrepreneurial culture, trade networks, traditional music, and the cultivation of Enset, sometimes called the false banana, which serves as a staple food for many communities. Today, the Gurage are widely respected throughout Ethiopia for their business achievements and strong community institutions. Taken together, the Tigray/Tigrayans, the Amhara, the Harare, the Argoba, and the Gurage represent the remarkable diversity found within the broader Habesha or Ethio-Semitic world. While each group possesses its own unique history, traditions, and identity, all reflect the centuries of interaction between Africa and Arabia that helped shape one of the most fascinating and unique civilizations on Earth. That's it for today's video. If you like this video, check out my previous videos. And as always, stay curious, stay smart, and thank you very much for watching.